Hello, my name is Haley Arrowood, and this is my 2024 portfolio review submission. The pieces I have chosen to showcase are the current event poster series, a snack box app UI wireframe, a repeating pattern design, geometric pattern designs, sticker designs, a coloring book based around my own personal brands, a three-dimensional wood engraving, and an eating disorder awareness number tear poster. These are my current event posters for visual communication during the summer of 2023. This was a semester-long project where we had to choose a style of art and study the ins and outs of it. This was around the time of the OceanGate Titan submarine tragedy where 5 people lost their lives due to company error and pride. As such, I based these posters around this tragedy to help educate myself on what happened and how the loss of life could have been avoided. I decided to take a satirical approach to my posters and sketch these 3 comps. Art Deco has a wonderful sense of scale, and I wanted to showcase that in the middle design by having the Titan sub receding towards a vanishing point. I originally started with dull and muted colors. It was at this point I noticed how my third comp of a stairwell did not blend in well with the trio, so I set that to the side for now. However, the background overshadowed the controller while the submarine vanished into the background due to the spotlight effect I had used. For the final version, I remedied the colors and made them more distinct. At this point, I had fully given up on the third comp with the stairwell, as it didn't go with the trio. Instead, I designed the third poster to be the main subject, the submarine, in more shallow waters with green plants to help separate the background from the foreground even more. The snack box UI design for experience design in spring of 2023 was challenging. Luckily, I had created websites before in other classes, so I wasn't going in blind. The first thing I created was the user interface. This was by far the most complicated user interface I've made to date. While I only had to mock up 4 of the pages, the entire user flow had to be designed. In the end, I modified how one would make a user flow to better fit how my brain views pathways. I used 4 colors to coordinate the map. Blue stands for a main page, or a separate web page that the customer is linked to when the button is clicked, such as email, phone call when on mobile, or other pages within the website itself. Green represents the subgroups offered on each page, such as a scrolling banner advert, specific links, or smaller subgroups. These smaller subgroups are listed in yellow and have a gray box tapped on top to let me know what section it's in. Pink represents a choice chosen by the user, such as choosing a specific box or adding or removing something from the profile. Finally, I used orange to represent what a specific part does. These may branch into different pink squares, or may be the final step in the process. For the wireframe, I started simple. I used a series of drop-down tabs for each specific dietary need or flavor profile. Originally, the selection was on the home page, but it felt too cluttered. Likewise, the profile screen was far too cluttered with sections that would benefit from their own page taking up space. In the end, I decided to split my 4 wireframes into 5. Information in About Us section were removed from the profile page and given a page of their own. Likewise, I removed the Build Your Own Box feature from the main shop tab and placed it on a page of its own. These changes, while small, helped clear up the user flow for the site and allowed the user to more efficiently find what they were looking for within the company. For my repeating pattern project and material design for the fall of 2023, I geared this project towards my stepmother. I gathered inspiration from a bunch of her favorite things such as elephants, chickens, cats, baking, and barns. In my early sketches, I just threw everything onto a page and watched where it took me. I was mostly inspired by the chickens and barns. Using the chickens and barns, I added my third element, stable crops. I wanted this to be a blanket that anyone could use, not just my stepmom. Thus, I leaned heavily into the farm aesthetic, using only 5 muted colors throughout the design. I'd never worked with such a small color palette before, so it was interesting to challenge myself to use each color in a unique and creative way. Eventually, I managed to maneuver the chickens into a pattern that I'm quite pleased with. The smaller color palette lended itself nicely to alternating colors, so I used blues and purples for my secondary color option. While I did design the pattern for a larger scale, it still lends itself quite nicely to a smaller scale as well. Outside of college, I have been using grids and lines to create geometric patterns for 3 years now. I begin each drawing on graph paper and follow either a 90-degree angle or a 45-degree angle. I have found that by employing the use of smaller angles, it takes away from the cubist nature of the art, breaking the linear flow that I attempt to give each piece. I carefully plan where each line will go, often removing entire sections in order to restore balance to the completed image. Because each line is drawn by hand, it is often hard to see where the piece will end up, and that's the part that I enjoy. Each piece will naturally be different simply because each line is its own entity. While I often design these for wall hangings with mind, I can easily see them as backpacks, phone cases, or tumblers. It really just depends on what your own personal preference is. As I approached the designs for my stickers and material design of fall 2023, I knew I wanted to create something more colorful and fun. As such, I gained inspiration on Pinterest from these 3 images specifically. The black outline, soft colors, and subtle shading are all what really inspired me. For my sketches, I really just drew the first things that came to mind. I knew I wanted a gummy shark sticker, so I made 3 designs of him. I made a slushy drink with gummy sharks and whipped cream, a bloody gummy shark, and a gummy shark in a jar. After that, I threw down some of my wanders, but quickly got an idea for a pizza slice rocket flying through space of toppings. After the pizza rocket, I had an image of my head of a cheese pull Oreo, which is filling dripping down like a melted cheese pull YouTuber's clickbait grilled cheese sandwich. Unfortunately for the Oreo, it was left behind as I chose 4 designs to continue on: the gummy shark in a jar, pizza rocket, the soda wanders, and the gum wander. At this point, I added a black blob around the pizza to hold all the space toppings. In the end, I used very different styles for each sticker. The wanders had a more gradient-based design to help them appear softer and rounder, while the shark in a jar and the pizza got black outlines and flatter colors. On top of these changes, the biggest critique was the pizza rocket's background, so I changed it to resemble a spiral galaxy after much feedback. One of my projects in my portfolio class was to flesh out my brand called A Regular Yarn, and one of the ways I'm doing that is through a coloring book based around my creatures that I call Wanders. I knew I wanted it to be bright and vibrant, so I used these as references specifically due to the vibrancy of their colors and the way they seem to flow together well. I created a coloring page specifically for the cover, as most of my pages are in landscape format. I knew I needed a portrait format color, so I decided to go with a page that captures the essence of my brand: chaotic, a little messy, and entertaining. The first pass was rough. My text was just placed on until I could find where to put it, so I went back to my inspiration board and decided to have 1 bar instead of 2, as I was still set on the bar design on the cover, as I felt that it would divide the space into 2 and provide resting space for the eyes. In the end, I felt like I was able to capture the whimsy that my brand has while still remaining true to my style guide. The title does not obstruct the image that much, and I was able to utilize my characters along the spine to add little references to the dolls that started this entire brand. When I saw that material design was going to have a 3D engraving project, I knew that I wanted to create something using my geometric patterns. I decided to create a wall hanging so that the piece is practical and will not be discarded after the project. In my first pass, I simply took one of my geometric designs and, at the suggestion of my classmates, blocked out some areas to be engraved with the lines. Unfortunately, this made for a really flat piece with little to no dimension, so I went back to the artboard. This time, I took the geo pattern and split it into 3 layers, with each layer getting smaller than the rest. I decided not to fully engrave the squares on the top layer in order to add some visual dissonance with the bottom layers. In the end, I am pleased that I redid this project, as the final version has much more depth and dimension than the first pass. I left the wood raw this time, as I didn't want to cover up the grain and tone variations in the natural wood. One of my earlier projects that I'm still pleased with was my Eating Disorder Awareness tear poster. This was made as part of a larger project on eating disorder awareness around the Millersville campus to bring attention to the general lack of resources that exist on campus for those struggling with an eating disorder. Tear strips are relatively simple, but references are always needed, and I found myself looking back on these many times over the height of my number strips. In the first pass, I wanted to highlight the confusion of someone suffering from an eating disorder. I can speak from personal experience that is extremely confusing and exhausting trying to find something to eat that your brain isn't terrified of. On top of that, you tend to have cravings of things that are full of fats and nutrients that you just aren't allowing yourself, leading you to feel surrounded by cravings and disordered thinking. This feeling was really what I wanted to highlight. In the end, color palettes were changed when my team finished our style guide. The first poster was reworked entirely to provide a clear message about forbidden foods, questionable foods, and safe foods. And this brings us to the end of the portfolio review for Haley Arrowood for a BDES major degree. Thank you so much for your time. Have a great rest of your day.